On October 6, 2025, Rush officially announced the 50-something tour. The press release confirmed Geddy, Lee and Lifeson. It confirmed Anika Nilles as the new drummer. It confirmed the dates, the cities, the format. And tucked inside that same announcement, not as a footnote, not as a follow-up statement released days later, but right there at the top, alongside Lee and Lifeson's own words, was a statement from two other people. Carrie Nuttall-Peart and Olivia Peart, Neil Peart's widow, and Neil Peart's daughter. They wrote, "We are thrilled to support the 50-something tour, celebrating a band whose music has resonated and inspired fans for generations, and to honor Neil's extraordinary legacy as both a drummer and lyricist." Neil's musicianship was singular. Compositions of intricacy and power that expanded what rhythm itself could express. As both drummer and lyricist, he was irreplaceable, inimitable in his artistry, and unmatched in the depth and imagination he brought to the lyrics that inspired and moved so many. He profoundly shaped how fans connected with him and the band, giving voice and meaning to their own lives. As the band enters this new chapter, it promises to be truly unforgettable. Read that again. The women who knew Neil Peart best, life we who loved him, who lost him, who have carried that loss every day since January 2020, looked at what Geddy Lee and Lifeson were proposing to do and said, "We are thrilled." Not resigned, not accepting, thrilled. That statement changed everything, and almost nobody has talked about what it actually means. When Rush went to the Peart family before announcing the tour, they were not fulfilling a legal obligation. There was no contract that required their approval. There was no mechanism by which Carrie Nuttall-Peart or Olivia Peart could have blocked the tour if they'd wanted to. Lee and Lifeson went to them because it was right, because they understood that whatever they were building had to be built with the family's knowledge and acceptance, justance of the fans' volonté way, not just for the fans' benefit, but because the alternative was unthinkable to them personally. This was grief and respect and the specific loyalty of people who had spent nearly 50 years making music together and did not want to dishonor what that meant. Consequence.net reported that Lee and Lifeson reached a mutual decision to tour again with the blessing of Peart's family. That word, mutual, is important. They had each other's blessing, and they had the family's blessing, before they had anything else. Now consider what it would have felt like if the family had said no. If Carrie Nuttall-Peart had said, "I don't want this." If Olivia Peart had said, "Please don't do this with someone else playing my father's parts in my father's band." Would Lee and Lifeson have proceeded anyway? Almost certainly not. The entire moral foundation of the 50-something tour rested on the premise that this was a tribute to Neil Peart, not a replacement of him, not a moving on from him, but a celebration of everything he and they had built together. Without the family's support, that foundation would have been hollow. They said yes. They said they were thrilled, and in doing so they gave Lee and Lifeson, and Anika Nilles, and eventually 70,000 fans at a sold-out arena in Los Angeles, a gift that nobody could have manufactured. Permission. Real, genuine, freely given permission. When Carrie Nuttall-Peart gave her first extended comments on the tour's announcement to the New York Times, she said something that stopped a lot of people in their tracks. She said, "Neil was the one that was ready to retire anyhow, and they really were not." Let that sentence sit for a moment. We have spent 5 years, since Peart's death in January 2020, operating on the assumption that Rush ended because 1/3 of the band died. That the story of Rush's conclusion was tragedy, pure and simple. A band that could not survive the loss of its essential third. But Carrie Nuttall-Peart is adding a layer to that story that changes how it reads. Neil Peart, she is telling us, had already made peace with the idea of stopping. He had already been moving toward retirement before the glioblastoma diagnosis in 2018. The R40 tour in 2015, his last, was not a reluctant farewell. He had been ready to walk away. Geddy Lee and Lifeson were not. Which means that the 50-something tour is, among other things, an answer to something that was already unresolved before Peart died. Two musicians who were not ready to stop playing this music finally finding a way to play it again, with the blessing of the man who was already ready to stop, communicated through the people who loved him most. She also said something about her late husband that is one of the most human details to emerge from the entire announcement period. She said that she and Olivia have always said Limelight is Neil's theme song, because he really did not enjoy being in the public eye. He was quite an introvert. It was hard on him touring. The man who spent 40 years on the road, who is remembered by fans as one of the greatest live performers in rock history, found it hard. The fame cost him something, and his widow and daughter talk about it openly now, because the truth of who he was matters as much as the mythology of what he did. When Anika Nilles posted her first public statement after the announcement, It had the specific quality of words chosen by someone who understood the weight of what she was stepping into. She wrote, "The past few days have been quite overwhelming. I'm sure many of you feel the same. I want to take a moment to sincerely thank Geddy and Alex for their trust and for welcoming me on this incredible new journey. I also don't want to miss the chance to warmly welcome all the new faces here and to thank you for your kind and open-minded words. They truly mean a lot. At the same time, I'm deeply grateful to everyone who has followed and supported my journey over the years. We're all in this together now, and I couldn't be more excited about what lies ahead." She was acknowledging that the announcement had been overwhelming not just for her, but for Rush fans everywhere. That the news of this tour landing in the world was something everyone was processing simultaneously, from different directions, with different feelings. She was not announcing her triumph, she was acknowledging a shared experience. And then, separately, she made an admission that became one of the most discussed quotes from the entire announcement period. She confirmed what Geddy Lee had already said publicly: she was not a Rush fan before getting the call. She said she had known of Rush, she knew the significant tracks, she understood the reputation, but she had not grown up with moving pictures on her bedroom wall. She had not spent years in reverence of Peart's catalog. She came to this music as a professional, not a devotee. And here is what she said about that. She called it, in one interview, an advantage that came with a responsibility. The advantage was objectivity. She could approach the parts without the emotional weight of having loved them for 20 years. Without the fear of getting wrong something she considered sacred. The responsibility was precisely the same thing from the other direction. She had to earn the emotional connection that every person in the audience already had, and she had to do it while she was performing the music, in real time, in front of them. Geddy Lee's decision to publicly reveal that Nilles was not a Rush fan before joining, and to frame it explicitly as a feature, rather than a bug, is one of the most strategically and musically intelligent things he has ever said publicly about this tour. Think about what the alternative would have looked like. If Rush had hired a lifelong devotee, a musician who had spent 20 years learning Peart's parts note by note, who came to the audition with a fully formed idea of exactly how everything should sound, what would that musician have been doing? They would have been trying to be Neil Peart, not because anyone asked them to, because they loved him too much to do anything else, and in trying to be Peart, they would have created a tribute act rather than a living band, a museum piece rather than a performance. The thing Lee and Lifeson were trying to do, and have said explicitly they were trying to do, was not resurrect the past. It was continue the music, continue in the spirit of what Rush had always been, a band that evolved, that challenged itself, that brought something new to each era rather than simply repeating the last one. That required someone who could learn the music without being imprisoned by their love of it, someone who could find the feel rather than copy the form, someone who had, in Lifeson's own phrase, a fresh story, something genuinely new to bring into the room. Nilles herself has reflected on what it meant to learn Peart's parts without the frame of personal devotion. She said it allowed her to approach them as a composer rather than as a fan. She could ask, what does this part actually do? What is its function within the song? What is it expressing? Rather than, how did Neil do this, and how do I do it exactly the same way? That is not a lesser relationship with the music, it is a different one. And for the purpose of this specific tour, it was the right one. There is a beautiful, almost symmetrical quality to the way the Peart family blessing connects to the not a fan detail, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. Carrie Nuttall-Peart and Olivia Peart gave their blessing to a tour that would put a new person in Neil Peart's seat. A person who had not grown up worshipping him, a person who approached his music with professional respect rather than personal reverence. In a strange way, that is exactly what Neil Peart himself would have wanted. Peart was famously uncomfortable with being worshipped. His introversion, the thing Carrie and Olivia described through Limelight, was not just shyness. It was a principled resistance to the kind of idol-making that rock culture encourages, and that he found suffocating. He wanted his music to be heard and felt. He did not want to be treated as a god. A drummer who came to his music as a musician, who learned it with professional rigor rather than religious devotion, who found the feel through study rather than through the kind of reverence that makes you afraid to deviate, is, in a real sense, honoring Peart's own values more completely than an imitator could. Carrie Nuttall-Peart and Olivia Peart said they were thrilled, not despite Anika Nilles being a fresh pair of ears, perhaps in part because of it. The music, as they wrote, gave voice and meaning to the lives of millions of fans. It was not meant to be frozen in place, it was meant to live. Nilles is letting it live. I want to end with the part of Carrie Nuttall-Peart's statement that I think will outlast everything else written about this tour. Neil's musicianship was singular. compositions of intricacy and power that expanded what rhythm itself could express. As both drummer and lyricist, he was irreplaceable, inimitable in his artistry, Chanquate. And then, as the band enters this new chapter, it promises to be truly unforgettable, irreplaceable, and also a new chapter, both things held together, without contradiction. That is not a statement written by someone who was persuaded to accept something they didn't want. That is a statement written by someone who understood, completely, what their husband and father was. And who understood, equally, that the music he made was bigger than any single chapter of the story, including the one that ended on January 7, 2020. Anika Nilles walked into this job knowing that the people who knew Neil Peart best had looked at what she was being asked to do and called it unforgettable. She carried that with her through the 5 days in Canada, through the months of preparation, through the Juno Awards, through opening night at the Kia Forum. She was not a fan. She became something different, a musician who earned her way into the music on its own terms, with fresh ears and professional respect and total commitment. And the people who loved Neil Peart most said, "We are thrilled." That is the foundation the 50-something tour is built on. Everything else, the reviews, the standing ovations, the sold-out arenas, flows from those two words. If this story moved you, drop a comment. What did you feel when you first read Carrie and Olivia's statement? Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.